At 11:40 p.m., someone pounded on my door like the house was on fire. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a flashlight, and yanked it open. She was soaking wet, shaking. One bag. Her eyes kept cutting back to the street like something was still out there. I'd known her for exactly 14 hours, and she whispered 3 words that changed both our lives. "Ryan, can I come in?" What happened next, what I learned about her, about myself, and about the man who had spent years slowly erasing her, I never saw coming. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it stays with you, subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. I want to tell you something honest before this story goes anywhere. I am not a hero. I never have been. I'm a 34-year-old operations planner who lives alone in a 2-bedroom house in Portland, Oregon, drinks too much bad coffee, and spends most of his evenings watching documentaries he falls asleep in the middle of. My life before that Tuesday was built entirely around one goal: keeping things predictable. Predictable meant safe. Predictable meant nobody got hurt. Predictable meant I knew exactly what every morning was going to look like before I opened my eyes. I was good at predictable. I was genuinely, professionally, embarrassingly good at it. So when a woman I had known for 14 hours showed up at my front door at 11:40 on a rainy Tuesday night, soaking wet and shaking, carrying one duffel bag and looking over her shoulder like something was still following her through the dark, that was the moment my entire system broke down. And honestly, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the morning first, because everything that mattered about that night started at 8:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I was staring at the wall clock in our department's morning briefing, silently calculating how many minutes were left before I could get my second cup of coffee, when the conference room door opened and Victor Hale walked in, followed by someone I had never seen before. Victor was our department manager, 51 years old, thick neck, the kind of voice that was always just slightly too loud for whatever room he was in. He had been at Northwest Freight Solutions for 11 years, which he reminded people of regularly, as though longevity were the same thing as competence. The woman behind him was carrying a legal pad, a laptop bag, and an expression I can only describe as carefully assembled calm, like she had spent the drive in rehearsing it. "This is Claire Dawson," Victor announced, not looking at her when he said it. "She'll be joining us as an operations analyst. Show her where things are." That was it. That was the entire introduction. He sat down and started talking about Q3 projections before she had found a chair. I watched her scan the room. 23 people, most of them already back to their laptops the way you do when you've sat through enough new hire introductions to know they rarely mean anything. She found an empty seat 2 down from mine, pulled it out quietly, and sat with her legal pad on the table in front of her, pen ready, like she was determined to prove on her very first morning that she was someone worth paying attention to. I noticed that. I also noticed that she kept her elbows pulled in, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. I didn't say anything then. I just filed it away. The first time I actually spoke to her was 40 minutes later in the hallway outside the copy room. She was staring at the network printer like it had personally offended her, a stack of papers pressed against her chest, her legal pad balanced on top. "It's not broken," I said. She looked at me. "The printer. It's just you have to hold the reset button on the left side for about 3 seconds before you send the job. Otherwise it just sits there and pretends it's thinking." She looked back at the printer, then at me. "That's terrible design." "Welcome to Northwest Freight." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile. More like the beginning of one that she hadn't decided to let out yet. "Ryan Bennett," I said, and put out my hand. "Claire Dawson." Her handshake was firm. She was clearly someone who had been told at some point that a soft handshake sent the wrong message. "How long have you been here?" 7 years. "And the printer has always been like this?" "The printer has always been like this." She shook her head slowly. "Okay, good to know." She held the reset button. The printer hummed to life. She looked mildly triumphant, which I found disproportionately charming for a Tuesday morning. By noon, I had already revised my initial read of her twice. My first impression, careful, rehearsed, calm, trying not to take up space, hadn't been wrong, but it was incomplete. Because at 11:15 in a department meeting I wasn't even supposed to be in, but had gotten pulled into at the last minute, Victor Hale did something I had seen him do before. He blamed someone for something that wasn't their fault. This time the someone was Claire. The discrepancy was in a shipment routing report, 3 weeks of compounded errors in a vendor communication chain that had been flagged and ignored before Claire ever set foot in the building. Victor dropped the report on the table in front of her, crossed his arms, and said in front of the entire room, "I need to understand how an error this size gets past a new analyst on her first morning. This is exactly the kind of thing I expect people in this department to catch." The room went very quiet. I watched the back of Claire's neck. For about 3 seconds she didn't move. I could see at the exact moment when someone is deciding whether to shrink or to stand, whether to apologize for something they didn't do because that's the path of least resistance, or to do the thing that feels dangerous. She reached for her laptop. "Can I show you something?" Victor's expression didn't change. "Go ahead." She pulled up the vendor communication log, turned the screen so the room could see. Her voice was completely even. "The timestamp on the original routing decision is March 3rd. I started here this morning. I'd like to understand what you'd like me to do differently going forward, but I want to make sure we're looking at the same information." She wasn't rude. She wasn't aggressive. She wasn't defensive. She was simply quietly, devastatingly accurate. Victor stared at the screen. Nobody said a word. He picked up his copy of the report. "I'll look into it," he said, and walked out. The meeting ended 30 seconds later. I caught up with her in the break room afterward. She was pouring coffee with her back to the room, and I noticed that her hands, the same hands that had held that laptop completely steady during the meeting, were shaking so badly she nearly spilled the cup. I walked over and poured myself one too, and for a minute we just stood there not saying anything. Then I said quietly, "That was either the bravest thing I've seen in this building in 7 years, or the most effective way to make a lifelong enemy. Possibly both." She laughed. It came out a little too sharp, a little too fast, the kind of laugh that's mostly adrenaline. "I couldn't just—" She stopped, set the cup down carefully. "He was wrong. He was completely wrong. And everyone in that room knew it. They did. Then why was I the only one who said something? I didn't have a good answer for that. So I said the true one, because you haven't been here long enough to know that saying something has a cost." She looked at me for a long moment. "What's the cost?" "We're about to find out," I said. And then, because I didn't want to leave her standing there alone with that weight, I picked up both our coffees and said, "Come on, I'll show you where they hide the decent creamer." We ate lunch together that day. It wasn't planned. It just happened the way things do when two people have already had one honest conversation, and neither of them wants to pretend it didn't happen. We sat at a corner table in the building's cafeteria, and I learned the basic outline of Claire Dawson, 29 years old, originally from Boise, Idaho. Supply chain management degree from the University of Washington. Had worked for a mid-size freight company in Seattle for the past 3 years before taking the position here. She asked about me. I gave her the equally basic outline. Portland native, had worked at Northwest Freight since my late 20s, liked the work well enough, had a house with a guest room. I didn't use 2 plants. I kept accidentally almost killing and then saving at the last minute. She laughed at that, a real laugh this time, not the adrenaline kind. "Accidental plant parenthood," she said. "That's a real commitment level." They've survived, somehow. I think they've just accepted their circumstances. "Story of a lot of things," she said, and then looked down at her sandwich like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. I didn't push. I had learned early in life that when someone lets something slip that's heavier than the conversation they're in, the kindest thing you can do is not make a scene out of it. We talked about logistics instead, about the routing errors in the report, about what the vendor change should have looked like, and why nobody had flagged it for 3 weeks. She knew exactly what she was talking about. Sharp, methodical, clear. By the time lunch was over, I had revised my read of her a 3rd time. Claire Dawson wasn't someone trying to prove something. She was someone who already knew what she was worth and was just waiting to see whether this new place was going to let her be it. I walked her toward the parking garage at the end of the day. It wasn't far out of my way, and she'd mentioned at lunch that she'd only moved to Portland 2 weeks ago and was still learning the building's layout. We stood at the edge of the garage for a minute in that awkward way where neither person quite knows whether to say goodbye or see you tomorrow or something in between. "Today was a lot," she said. "It was," I agreed. "Does it usually move that fast?" "The work number Victor sometimes." She nodded slowly. She was looking out at the street. The rain had started the quiet kind, not dramatic, just steady and gray, the way Portland does it. "Thank you," she said, "for the printer trick, and the coffee, and—" She gestured vaguely, which I understood to mean the whole afternoon. "You'd have been fine either way," I said, "but you're welcome." She smiled, and then she walked into the garage, and I turned and walked the other direction toward my own car, and I thought, good person, smart. Going to have a rough time with Victor, but she'll manage. I thought I'd see her in the morning. I went home, made dinner, watched about 40 minutes of a documentary about migratory birds. Fell half asleep on the couch. At 11:40 p.m., someone knocked on my door. The knock itself told me something was wrong before I even got to the door. It wasn't the polite knock of a neighbor with a package. It wasn't the rhythmic knock of someone who expected to be welcomed. It was 3 quick hard raps, the kind of knock that means I need you to hear me right now. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter, not for any good reason, just because it was the first thing my hand found in the dark, and I opened the door. She was standing in the rain with one duffel bag over her shoulder. Her work blazer was soaked through. Her dark hair was plastered to her face. She wasn't crying, or she had been and had stopped, and her eyes had gone past the kind of red that tears make into something drier and more exhausted than that. But it was the way she kept looking past me over my shoulder and then back at the street that made the hair stand up on my arms. "Ryan," she said. Not hi, not "I'm sorry to bother you," just my name, like it was a door she was knocking on. "Yeah," I said. "Can I come in?" I stepped back. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't say what happened, or "Are you okay?" or "How did you know where I live?" Even though all 3 of those were queuing up in the back of my mind, I just stepped back and let her in, and I closed the door, and I locked it. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home made her exhale, like she'd been holding her breath for a while. She stood in the middle of my living room and looked at it like she wasn't quite sure what to do with the fact that she had gotten somewhere. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the lamp on the side table, softer. "You want to sit down?" I asked. She sat on the couch, still had the bag on her shoulder, like she wasn't sure yet if she was staying. I went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of water and a clean towel. She took the towel, pressed it against her face for a moment, then folded it in her lap with the same precise, controlled movement I'd watched her use all day, and I realized that careful, measured composure wasn't just a work personality. It was armor. She'd been wearing it a long time. "How did you know my address?" I asked. My voice was quiet, not accusatory. I was genuinely curious. "It was on your emergency contact form in the HR directory. I looked it up this afternoon. I know that's strange. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize." She looked up at me. "I mean it. Don't apologize for being here. Just tell me what happened." She held the glass of water with both hands, looked at it. Then she told me. She didn't start with Nathan. She started actually with the drive from Seattle to Portland 2 weeks ago. About how she'd watched the city limits disappear in her rearview mirror and felt for the first time in nearly 4 years like she could breathe all the way down. "I thought distance would be enough," she said. "I found an apartment before I told anyone I was leaving. I applied for the job here before I told anyone I was leaving. I was careful. I was so careful." "Who were you being careful about?" I asked. She looked at the window. The rain was streaking down it. "His name is Nathan Cole. We were together for almost 4 years. She said it the way you say the name of a place you went to that left a mark on you. Not like a former boyfriend, like a former weather system. We lived together from pretty early on," she continued. "He was—" She stopped, reconsidered. "He seemed like someone who paid close attention to the people he cared about. That's what I thought it was at first. Attention. Nobody had ever paid that much attention to me." I didn't say anything. I just listened. It started with small things, like he didn't like when I made plans without telling him first. Which, okay, we were living together. That's consideration, right? You tell your partner when you're going somewhere. That's just courtesy. She said it like she'd rehearsed that logic before, like she'd had to argue it with herself. And then it was about who I was making plans with. He didn't like a couple of my friends, said they were bad for me, said they didn't respect me. "Did you believe him?" "At the time," she considered. "I thought he cared about my well-being. I thought he knew me well enough to see things I was missing." She paused. Looking back, he was just slowly narrowing the circle. The friends he had problems with were the ones who would have noticed, the ones who would have asked questions. She drank some water. He controlled the money, which started out as we'll both put our income into one account. It's simpler that way. I'll handle the bills. And then one day I realized I had to ask him when I needed something. Not tell him. Ask. He'd refuse. Sometimes. Sometimes he'd just make it complicated. There'd be a conversation about whether I really needed it, whether I was being responsible, whether this was a pattern of behavior on my part. She pressed her lips together. He never raised his voice. He never... She stopped, looked at the towel in her lap. There was never anything I could have pointed to and said, this is the thing. It was just 1,000 small things over 4 years that added up to me being someone I didn't recognize. She finally left 3 weeks before that night. She'd been planning it quietly for months, small steps, careful ones. She'd opened her own bank account, saved money in amounts small enough not to trigger questions, applied for the Portland job using a friend's address so the correspondence wouldn't come to the apartment, signed her lease before Nathan knew she was even thinking about leaving. The day she left, she waited until he was at work, packed what she could carry in 2 bags, and drove away. I didn't leave a note, she said. I know that sounds... No, I said. It sounds smart. She looked at me like she'd been expecting a different response. He would have used it, I said. Whatever you wrote, he'd have found a way to use it. Something shifted in her face, like a word she'd been trying to find for a long time had just been handed to her. Yes, she said quietly. Exactly. Nathan had found her. She didn't know how yet. But that night, her second week in Portland, she'd come home from a late trip to the grocery store to find him standing outside her apartment building, just standing there, in the dark, in the rain. He didn't yell, she said. He never yells. That's the thing people don't... She stopped. He stood there and he talked to me, for almost an hour, in a perfectly normal voice, like I'd just stepped away for a few minutes and he'd been waiting, apologizing, explaining, telling me I didn't understand the full picture, that I was reacting to stress, that I needed to come home. And you told him no. I told him no, and I told him that if he didn't leave, I was calling the police. She swallowed. He left. But before he went, she set the glass down. He looked at me and said, "You'll understand eventually that nobody knows you like I do." The room was quiet. "That's the part that scared me," she said. "Not the hour outside my door, not the drive from Seattle, the calm, the way he said it like it was just true, like it was just a fact I would come to understand." I looked at her. "So you grabbed a bag." "So I grabbed a bag and came here. I didn't know where else to go." She finally set the duffel bag down off her shoulder, like she'd just then decided she could. "My closest friend here is Monica from accounting, and I've known her for 2 weeks. My family is in Boise, and if I called them tonight, they'd tell me to come home, and I..." She stopped. "I'm not going backwards. I'm not. I just needed somewhere to be tonight that wasn't my apartment." "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Okay. You can stay in the guest room. I'll get you some clean towels. In the morning, we can figure out whatever comes next." I stood up. "And I want to be clear about something." She looked up at me. "You don't owe me anything for this. Not an explanation, not gratitude, not conversation. This is just a room with a bed that isn't being used. You can stay as long as you need to figure out something safer. That's it. No strings, no debt, no..." "Ryan," she said my name the same way she had on the porch, like a door. "Why are you being this kind to me?" I thought about it for a second. "Because you caught a man in front of 20 people making you responsible for his mistakes, and instead of crying or quitting or apologizing, you opened a laptop and showed him the timestamps." I paused. "Somebody who does that at 9 a.m. on their first day deserves somewhere safe to sleep." She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were still red. Her blazer was still damp. The careful composure she wore like armor was at that moment somewhere around her knees. But she nodded, and I went to get the towels. I lay awake for a long time that night, not because I was afraid, not because I was particularly worried in a logistical sense about having someone in my guest room, but because I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. He was just slowly narrowing the circle. I'd heard of that. I had read about it in the abstract, the way you read about things that happen to other people in other places. But hearing it described from the inside, Hearing a sharp, composed, clearly intelligent woman explain in precise and careful language how someone had methodically dismantled her life while she was still living in it. That was something different. I kept thinking about her hands shaking after the meeting, the way she'd held her elbows in, the way she apologized for knowing my address. That's terrible design, she'd said about the printer. Like someone who had spent years in an environment that ran wrong had still held on to the instinct to name the thing clearly. I thought whoever she was before Nathan Cole started working on her, she's still in there. I could tell. And I also thought, which I told myself was just practical, just humanitarian, just the thought of a decent person in a situation whoever she becomes after him is going to be someone worth knowing. That was all. That was everything. I fell asleep somewhere around 2 a.m, listening to the rain. In the morning, she was already up. I came down to find that she had made coffee not just for herself, but for both of us, which told me she'd been paying attention at lunch to how I took it, which told me she noticed things even when she was exhausted and scared. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her legal pad already working. The duffel bag was gone, put away somewhere, I assumed. A small act of making herself settled, making herself real in the space instead of just a visitor in it. "You figured out the coffee machine," I said. "It was a lever instead of a button, I guessed." "You guessed right." She looked up at me over the rim of the cup. There were still shadows under her eyes, but the composure was back in place, not brittle this time, quieter, like something had settled overnight that had been rattling loose. "I want to find a more permanent solution," she said. "I know this isn't... There's no rush." "Ryan." "There's no rush," I said again firmly. "Drink your coffee. We have to be at work in 2 hours." She looked at me for a moment, then she looked down at her coffee. "Thank you," she said. This time I let her say it, because it didn't sound like an apology anymore. It sounded like a beginning. We drove to work separately, which mattered, because whatever was happening, it was her story to tell or not tell, her life to manage, not mine to narrate for her. I watched her walk into the building ahead of me, legal pad under her arm, shoulders back, that careful composure reconstructed to full height overnight. And I thought she's going to be okay. I thought she's going to be more than okay. What I didn't know yet, what neither of us knew, was that Nathan Cole was not finished. And neither was Victor Hale. And the 2 wars Claire Dawson was about to fight, one at home and one at work, were just beginning. 3 days passed, then a week, then 2. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, Claire Dawson stopped being a woman I barely knew and started being someone I thought about at 6 a.m. before I was fully awake. Not the way you think, or not only the way you think. It was simpler than that and more complicated. It was the way you start thinking about a person when their presence rearranges the furniture of your ordinary life, and you don't notice until one morning you reach for the second coffee mug before you've even decided to. She had been staying in my guest room for 9 days when I came home on a Thursday night and smelled something burning. I walked into the kitchen and found Claire standing over my stove, staring at a pan with the specific expression of someone who has just lost an argument with physics. "Don't say anything," she said without looking up. I wasn't going to say anything. "You were going to say something." "I was going to ask if you needed help." She turned and looked at me. There was a smear of something dark on her left cheek, and she was holding the spatula like it had betrayed her personally. "I was trying to make pasta," she said. "I don't know how I made it to 29 years old without learning how to cook pasta. It's a life skill that gets away from some people. It's boiling water, Ryan. And yet..." She looked at the pan again, then back at me. Then she started laughing, the real kind, not the adrenaline kind, not the careful kind. The kind that makes you press your hand over your mouth because it's larger than you expected. I took the pan, rinsed it, and started over. She sat on the counter and watched, and we talked about absolutely nothing important for 45 minutes, and I thought, this is the most comfortable I have been in this house since I moved in, which should have told me something. It told me something. I chose not to look at it directly yet. The rhythm of those first 2 weeks was something I hadn't expected and couldn't have manufactured if I'd tried. She was up before me most mornings, coffee already made, legal pad already in use. We drove to work separately. We didn't make the point of eating lunch together every day, but more often than not, we ended up at the same corner table without having planned it. We came home at different times. We made dinner together, sometimes separately, other times. On Thursday nights, she watched a home renovation show she was mildly obsessed with, and I sat at the other end of the couch and read, and halfway through the episode, she would start explaining the structural problems she saw in whatever project they were showcasing. And I would look up, and we would argue about load-bearing walls with completely unwarranted confidence for 20 minutes. It was ordinary, deeply, quietly ordinary. And for someone who had spent 4 years having ordinary life turned into something she needed permission for, I understood even then that ordinary was exactly what she needed. What I didn't understand yet was how much I needed it too. About 10 days in on a Saturday morning, she looked up from her coffee and said, "Nathan texted me last night." I put my mug down. "What did he say?" She turned her phone so I could see the screen. It was long. I read the first few lines, something about how he understood she needed space, how he had been doing a lot of reflecting, how he had spoken to someone, a therapist, he said, though he named no one, and he wanted her to know that he was different now, that he missed her, that he just wanted to talk. "What are you going to do?" I asked. She took the phone back, looked at it for a moment. Then she set it face down on the table. "Nothing," she said. "I'm going to do nothing." "Okay. Does that sound—" She stopped, recalibrated. He used to tell me that when I didn't respond to him, I was being punishing. That silence was passive aggression. Is that what this is? She thought about it seriously, like it was a real question worth answering. "No," she said. "I'm not doing it to punish him. I'm doing it because there is nothing he can say that I need to hear." She looked at me. "Is that healthy?" "You're asking the wrong person," I said, "but it sounds right to me." She nodded. Once. Firm. She didn't look at the phone again that morning. That was the first time I saw her make a decision and not second-guess it immediately afterward. It was a small thing, but small things were adding up. The texts continued over the following days. The apologetic ones first, then the nostalgic ones, "Remember when we did this? Remember when you said that?" Then they shifted slowly the way the tide changes without announcing itself. Less sorry, more explanatory, then less explanatory and more questioning. "Why won't you answer? What did I do that was so bad? You owe me a conversation, Claire." She showed me each one. Not because she needed my permission, I understood that, but because she was building a record and she wanted a witness. I was glad to be one. And then on a Wednesday morning, about 2 weeks in, she came downstairs with something different on her face. Not the exhausted composure I was used to. Something sharper, quieter. She put her phone on the table. "He knows I go to the grocery store on Tuesday evenings," she said. I looked at her. "I never told him that. I barely have a routine here. I've only been in Portland a month. But he said in this message," she pointed to the screen without touching it like she didn't want to. "He said, 'I know you're not cooking much. You're probably still figuring out that area.'" I looked at the message, read it twice. "That could be a guess," I said. "It could be." Her voice was steady, too steady. "Or someone is watching me." The word sat between us. Watching. Not following, not tracking. Watching, present tense, current, ongoing. "Have you seen him near your apartment?" I asked. "Not since that first night." She picked up the phone, put it in her pocket. Which is almost worse, because at least that night I knew where he was. I didn't say anything for a moment, because the thing I wanted to say was then stay here, and I knew that wasn't the right thing. The right thing was what I said instead. "You should document this one specifically. The details he mentioned, the timeline. If he's getting information, somehow you want a record of what he knew and when." She looked at me steadily. "I already did," she said. Of course she had. She picked up her legal pad from the table, showed me 2 pages of notes, dates, times, message content, specific details that didn't add up. "I've been keeping this since the first night," she said. "Every contact, every message, every appearance." I stared at those 2 pages, at her careful, methodical handwriting, at the dates and timestamps she had logged with the same precision she brought to shipping reports. "Claire," I said. "Yeah, you're going to be okay." She didn't answer right away. She closed the legal pad and tucked it under her arm. "I know," she said finally. And for the first time, I believed she believed it. That was the first twist I hadn't seen coming. Not Nathan. Not the texts. The fact that she was already 3 steps ahead of him without anyone telling her to be. She had been running, yes, but she had been running with a plan. At work, things were simultaneously better and worse in ways that were hard to separate. Better because Claire was good at her job in a way that was becoming impossible to ignore. She caught a routing inefficiency in the third week that saved the company something in the range of $40,000 annually. She presented it in a department meeting calmly and clearly, with the documentation laid out so that there was no ambiguity about where the analysis had come from. Victor sat at the head of the table with his jaw set and said, "I'll have my team review this." 3 people in the room caught my eye. Monica Reyes was one of them. Worse because Victor had decided quietly, methodically, in a way that left no obvious fingerprints that Claire Dawson was a problem to be managed. He gave her projects with incomplete information and tight deadlines. He changed expectations midstream and then expressed disappointment when the outcome didn't match a target he'd never clearly stated. He scheduled meetings she wasn't told about in time. He CC'd her manager's manager on email chains in ways that looked collaborative, but were designed to make her look disorganized. None of it was loud. None of it was obvious. It was a system of small pressures, and if you didn't know what to look for, it looked like a high-standards manager pushing a junior employee. But I had worked at Northwest Freight for 7 years. I had watched Victor operate, and what I was watching now looked exactly like what it was. I told her one evening over takeout containers and the terrible home renovation show what I was seeing. "I know," she said. "You know. I've been documenting it." She didn't look up from her food. Every incident, every changed expectation, every email where the CC didn't make sense, dates, times, what was said, what the original instruction had been. I stared at her. She finally looked up. "What? You're doing the same thing at work that you're doing with Nathan." She was quiet for a second. "Yeah," she said. "I guess I am." "Where did you learn to do that?" She considered the question seriously. "I learned it the hard way," she said. "When you live with someone who constantly rewrites what happened, you stop trusting your own memory. So you start writing things down, just so you know, just so there's something that doesn't change." She picked up her fork. "Turns out it's useful in a lot of situations." That was the moment I understood something that I hadn't fully put together before. The control Nathan had tried to exercise over Claire, the rewriting, the second-guessing, the systematic erosion of her confidence in her own perceptions, had failed at something. It had failed to take away the part of her that looked directly at a problem and named it precisely. He had tried to make her doubt herself, but she had quietly, without fanfare, started keeping receipts. About 3 weeks into Claire staying with me, Monica Reyes knocked on my office door. Monica was 53, had been in the accounting department for 16 years, and had the specific energy of someone who had seen everything and chose carefully what to comment on. She closed the door behind her, sat down. "How well do you know Claire Dawson?" she asked. "Reasonably well," I said, which was both true and an understatement. "Victor's pattern," Monica said without preamble. "What he's doing to her, he's done it before. I can give you 4 names. 2 of them left the company. 1 transferred departments. 1 is still here and still dealing with it." I leaned back. "Does Claire know this?" "That's what I want to talk to her about." She looked at me steadily. "She's documenting everything, isn't she?" It wasn't really a question. "I think so," I said. "Good. Because what I'm thinking about doing is going to require more than one person's complaint. It's going to require a pattern. And right now, I think she might be the person with the clearest documentation of the pattern. You want to file a formal complaint." "I want to file a formal complaint that HR cannot dismiss as a personality conflict." She sat forward. "Ryan, I've watched this man do this for 11 years. Do you understand what it's like to watch that for 11 years and not have enough to make it stop?" I did understand, or I was beginning to. "I'll talk to her," I said. Monica stood up. "Tell her I'm not asking her to do this alone. Tell her I'm asking her to do it with people who have been watching longer than she has." She left, and I sat with that for a while, because here was the thing about asking Claire Dawson to step up and make herself visible, to put her name on a formal complaint, to draw the attention of management, to make it impossible for the thing to be quietly ignored. It was asking her to do at work exactly what she was still learning to do in her personal life. And I didn't know yet if she was ready. It turned out I was wrong about that too. I told her that evening. All of it, what Monica had said, what she was proposing, what it would mean if Claire agreed. Claire listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me about the 4 names. Not, I'm not sure I can do this. Not what if it backfires. Not do you think I should. Tell me about the 4 names, I told her. She asked precise methodical questions. What patterns had appeared in each case, how long before each person had either left or transferred, whether there was any documented communication, whether HR had ever been formally notified. Then she opened her legal pad. Can you get me a meeting with Monica this week? She asked. Yes, I said. She nodded, started writing, and I realized I had once again underestimated her. The meeting with Monica happened 2 days later on a Friday in the conference room after hours when the floor was mostly empty. I sat in not because anyone asked me to, but because Claire asked me to, and she said, I want someone there who I trust. That sentence landed somewhere I didn't immediately examine. Monica laid out everything she had, dates going back years, patterns, the names of the employees who had experienced similar treatment, the ones willing to be named, and the ones who weren't. She was organized, clear, and grim in the way you get when you've been angry about something for a very long time and have finally found somewhere to put it. Claire listened to all of it, asked her questions. Then she opened her own legal pad and walked Monica through her documentation. Monica read through it slowly. When she looked up, she said, This is extraordinary. It's 3 weeks, Claire said. I know, that's what makes it extraordinary. Something moved across Claire's face that I couldn't fully name. Not pride exactly, more like recognition, like she was being told for the first time by someone other than me that the thing she had been quietly building in the dark was real. Okay, she said, I'll be part of this. Monica nodded. You understand this might get worse before it gets better. Things usually do, Claire said, and then she almost smiled. I've been taking notes since day 1. Walking out of that meeting, just the 2 of us in the empty corridor, I said, How do you feel? She thought about it honestly. Terrified, she said, and like I finally did the right thing. She paused. Can both of those be true at the same time? Yeah, I said. I think that's actually what courage feels like. She looked at me sideways. That's very philosophical for a Friday at 8:15. I have my moments. She laughed, just briefly, and then she said something that I carried with me for weeks afterward. Ryan, can I ask you something? Yeah. Why hasn't any of this, me showing up at your door, staying in your house, all of it? Why hasn't it felt like charity? Because it should feel like charity and it doesn't, and I'm trying to understand why. I thought about that carefully, because it deserved a careful answer. Because you're not acting like someone being rescued, I said finally. You're acting like someone who borrowed a ladder. There's a difference. She was quiet. Then, a ladder. You're using it to climb, not waiting for someone to carry you. She looked straight ahead for a moment. Then she nodded, like she was filing it away. Okay, she said. I can work with that. That was the last easy night for a while, because the following Monday Nathan texted her something that was different from everything before it. He texted her a detail, not a guess, not a general reference, a specific detail. The name of the coffee shop she had stopped at the previous Wednesday. Not the street, not the neighborhood, the name. She called me on her lunch break. I could hear it in her voice immediately. Not panic, not tears, something harder and colder than that. He knows where I've been, she said. Okay, I said. I kept my voice level because she needed level. That's specific enough to matter. Have you been posting anything, location tags? No, nothing. I turned off location services on everything when I left Seattle. Could he have access to something you're still logged into? An old account, a shared subscription. She went quiet. We had a shared Google account, she said slowly, for a shared calendar. I stopped using it, but I don't think I ever revoked his access to the location history. And there it was. Not psychic, not someone following her through the streets, not a network of informants. A shared account she had forgotten about in the chaos of leaving, and he had apparently been checking it like a map. The silence on the line was almost physical. Then she said very quietly, I feel so stupid. Don't, I said, firm. This is what he does. He operates in the spaces people don't think to check. That's not stupidity. That's someone who planned for your escape better than you could plan it without knowing he was capable of this. Another silence. I'm logging out of everything, she said. Right now. Good. And Claire? I'm adding it to the documentation. Yes, do that. And I'm calling a lawyer this week. That was the second thing I hadn't expected to hear. Yeah, I said. Monica knows one. Someone who handles this kind of situation. Her voice was still cold and hard and completely clear. I was hoping I wouldn't need to. But I think I was wrong about that. I think that's the right call. She exhaled, long and slow. Ryan. Yeah. Thank you for answering. I'll always answer, I said. She hung up. I sat in my office for 10 minutes and stared at my desk and thought about Nathan Cole, who I had never met, who had spent 4 years systematically taking apart a woman who caught workplace discrepancies on her first morning, who kept meticulous documentation, who made coffee for 2 people without being asked, who argued about load-bearing walls on Thursday nights with complete confidence. I thought about the kind of man who looks at someone like that and sees something to control, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something that had no particular home in a person who preferred predictable. Something that was not quite anger, and not quite protectiveness, and not quite anything I had a clean word for. I filed it away. I went back to work. That evening we changed every password, revoked every shared account access, and went through every app on her phone one by one at my kitchen table while we ate cold pizza, and she got progressively angrier in a way that was honestly magnificent. Not scared angry, not defeated angry, active, clear, directed angry, the kind of angry that makes people do something. He's been watching me move through a city I just got to, she said, scrolling through her account settings. For weeks, like I was a dot on a map. Yeah, while he was sending me messages about missing me. She closed the app, looked at the ceiling. That is actually so much worse than I... She stopped, started again. When I left him, I thought the hardest part would be being lonely, starting over, feeling like I'd lost 4 years. She put the phone down. I did not think the hardest part would be a shared Google Calendar. To be fair, most people don't plan for that. I should have. You were leaving a man who'd spent 4 years making you feel like your judgment was faulty. Of course you didn't think of everything. She looked at me. You do that, she said. Do what? Take the thing I'm blaming myself for and reframe it without making me feel stupid for having blamed myself. She tilted her head slightly. Where did you learn to do that? I thought about it. I had a really good high school English teacher, I said. She used to say that most guilt is just anger that got confused about where to aim. Claire stared at me. That's the most useful thing I've heard in 3 years, she said. I handed her another piece of pizza. She took it. And for a few minutes, we sat at that table in silence. And it was the specific kind of silence that happens when 2 people are comfortable enough with each other that neither of them needs to fill it. I noticed it. And I put it away and I did not look at it directly. Not yet. Because she was still in the middle of a war I had no right to rush her through. And whatever I felt, whatever was growing in the space between the terrible TV shows and the Thursday night arguments and the cold pizza and the borrowed ladder it would keep. She needed to finish saving herself first, and she was getting very, very close. The week after the account discovery, Nathan's texts stopped, not slowed down, stopped, completely. For 4 days, nothing. Which, as Claire explained to me on a Wednesday evening with remarkable composure, was its own kind of message. He knows I found it, she said. He knows because I revoked access and he noticed. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. He's recalculating. What does that mean? She thought about it. It means something is about to change, she said. He doesn't go quiet when he's given up. He goes quiet when he's deciding what to try next. I believed her. She knew him in a way I never could. So we wait, I said. We wait, she agreed. And we keep the documentation current. She pulled out the legal pad. It was nearly full. She opened it to the next blank page, wrote the date, and started a new entry. That image, her sitting at my kitchen table at 10 p.m., writing with a quiet, focused precision, building something that could not be rewritten or denied or taken from her, that image stayed with me. Not because it was dramatic, because it wasn't. It was just a woman at a table doing the quiet, unglamorous work of protecting herself with the only tools that reliably work. The truth, written down, dated. And I thought whatever Nathan Cole thought he had taken from her, this part, he never touched. This part was always hers. The silence from Nathan lasted exactly 6 days. I know because Claire had it in her legal pad, date, time, duration. She tracked his silences the same way she tracked his messages, because she understood something I was only beginning to grasp with a man like Nathan Cole. The quiet was never empty. It was loaded. It was the held breath before something. On the 7th day he called. Not texted. Called. She was sitting across from me at the kitchen table when her phone lit up with a number she'd blocked 3 times already on 3 different variations. He kept getting new ones. She looked at the screen, looked at me. "Don't answer it," I said. "I know." She let it ring, watched it like it was a thing that might bite her if she moved too fast. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail, then rang again immediately, then a 3rd time, then stopped. Neither of us said anything. Then her phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. She picked it up, listened with the phone pressed to her ear and her face completely still. I watched her jaw tighten once, just slightly, and then release. 37 seconds of voicemail. I counted. She lowered the phone. "Well," I asked. "He says he just wants to talk, that he's worried about me, that he spoke to my mother." She set the phone face down. "He's been in contact with my mother." That landed in the room like something thrown hard. "What?" "She called me last Tuesday, said Nathan had reached out, said he was concerned, said I'd disappeared and he didn't know if I was safe." She looked at her hands. "I told her I was fine and that I'd explain later. I didn't think—" She stopped. "He's working the perimeter, the people around me." I sat with that for a moment, because what she'd just described was not the behavior of a man who missed someone. It was the behavior of someone running a campaign. "Claire," I said carefully, "have you talked to the lawyer yet? I have an appointment Thursday." "Good." I leaned forward. "This is new information. The contact with your mother. Bring the voicemail. All of it." She nodded. Already knew. She was already writing in the legal pad. I watched her write the date, the time, the content of the voicemail, the information about her mother. Precise and methodical. Not shaking, not crying. Her pen moved across the page with the same steady hand she'd used to pull up the timestamp records on her first morning at Northwest Freight. He had spent 4 years trying to convince her she couldn't trust herself, and she was sitting at my kitchen table at 9:30 at night, building an airtight case against him with the self-trust he'd tried to dismantle. I had never found anything as quietly extraordinary as that. 3 days before her lawyer appointment, something happened at work that changed the temperature of everything. Victor called Claire into his office at 4:15 on a Monday afternoon. I found out about it afterward from her at the kitchen table, with the specific tone she used when she was replaying something out loud to understand it better. He had closed the door, sat down across from her without asking her to sit, which she noted was deliberate. Then he told her in a measured voice that he had heard she had been speaking to other employees about her experiences in the department. She told me she'd felt the air shift the moment he said it. "He didn't yell," she said. "He never yells. He just looked at me in this very still way and said, 'I think we should keep departmental matters inside the department. Don't you agree?'" "What did you say?" I said I appreciated the conversation and that I agreed it was important to handle things through the appropriate channels. She paused. And then I went back to my desk and I wrote down every word he said, the exact time, and the fact that the door was closed and no one else was present. I stared at her. "He just told you without telling you that he knows," I said. "Yes." "And you responded without confirming or denying anything?" "Yes." "And now you have documentation that he attempted to discourage you from speaking to other employees." She looked at me, something almost like a smile at the edge of her mouth. "The documentation is already in the legal pad," she said. I sat back. "Claire, I want to say something and I need you to hear it clearly." "Okay." "You are the most prepared person I have ever watched walk into a fight." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "He told me for 4 years that I was emotional, that I overreacted, that I couldn't see things clearly." She looked at the legal pad. I started writing things down because I didn't trust my own memory anymore. I was trying to hold on to what actually happened." She closed it. "I didn't realize I was building evidence. I was just trying to stay sane." That was the moment right there, that specific sentence that I felt something move in my chest that I had been very carefully not looking at for weeks. I didn't say anything about it, but it moved. Thursday came. She went to the lawyer alone. She'd asked me if I thought she should go alone, and I'd said yes immediately, because this was hers. This was entirely hers. And she came back 2 hours later and sat down at the table and said, "She thinks we have enough for a civil harassment restraining order. She wants more documentation of the pattern, specifically the location tracking and the contact with my mother. And she says, if he makes physical contact again, shows up anywhere we file that day." "How do you feel?" I asked. She thought about it. Like I finally have a wall, she said, not just a door I'm holding shut. I understood exactly what she meant. 2 days after that, she moved into her own apartment. I want to be honest about how that felt because this story doesn't work if I'm not honest about it. It felt like the right thing, 100% the right thing. She had found a building with a secured entry, a good landlord and a neighbor who was a retired nurse who introduced herself within 10 minutes and told Claire she kept odd hours, so to knock any time. The apartment was smaller than my guest room in some ways that mattered and larger in all the ways that did. And she moved in, and I helped her carry boxes, and we argued about whether a bookshelf could hold what she was planning to put on it, and at the end of the evening when the last box was inside, she stood in the middle of her own space with her hands on her hips and looked around with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something between terrified and lit up, something that said, "This is mine, all of this is mine. Nobody controls what happens in this space but me." "How does it feel?" I asked. She turned around slowly, taking it all in. Like I forgot to breathe for 4 years, she said, and someone just reminded me how. I helped her put the bookshelf together. It absolutely could not hold what she planned to put on it. I was right about that, but we compromised, and then I went home. My house felt very quiet. I noticed it. I filed it. I moved on. 3 days after she moved in, Victor escalated. He had apparently decided following the closed-door conversation that the subtle approach was no longer serving him, because what he did next was not subtle. He pulled Claire's project, the logistics optimization work she had been building for 6 weeks, the one that represented the most significant operational improvement the department had seen in years, and announced in a team meeting that the project would be restructured under a different lead, citing concerns about the timeline. The timeline that he had approved, in writing, 3 weeks earlier. Claire told me that evening by phone. She was calm in that way she got when she was calm, because the alternative was something she couldn't afford right now. "He did it in front of everyone," she said. "He didn't pull me aside first. He announced it in the meeting, in front of 22 people. Are you okay?" "I'm furious," she said, "but I'm okay." A pause. "Ryan, I need to ask you something." "Yeah." "The email where he approved the timeline, I have it saved, but I want to make sure before I bring it to Monica that I'm not misreading what it says. Can you look at it?" She forwarded it. I read it. It was clear, specific, and signed with Victor's name and his manager's name CC'd. "You're not misreading it," I said. "That's an approval." "Okay." Her voice went very quiet. Then, "I'm done waiting for the right moment. I want to file the formal complaint this week." "Have you talked to Monica?" "I'm calling her next." She hung up. I sat with the email on my screen and the sick, specific anger of watching a person who had finally found solid ground, get the ground yanked out from under them again, and choosing against all reasonable expectation to fight back instead of fall. The formal complaint was filed the following Tuesday. Claire's name was on it. Monica's name was on it. 2 other employees who had been watching Victor's pattern for years and had finally decided that Claire's documentation gave them something to stand behind. HR acknowledged receipt within 24 hours. By the end of the week, an investigation had been opened. Victor's response was to become very, very quiet in the office. Not humble quiet, strategic quiet. The quiet of someone who had finally realized that this time the person across from him had been writing things down. I want you to understand what that week felt like inside Northwest Freight. 23 people in a department, half of them aware that something significant had happened, none of them quite talking about it openly, all of them recalibrating. Victor walking the floor with a careful neutrality that was its own kind of message. Claire at her desk, methodical and focused, doing the work with the same precision she always had, giving no one anything to point to. Monica stopped by my office on the Thursday. "She's remarkable," Monica said. There was something in her voice I hadn't heard before, something almost like relief. "Yeah," I said. "When I first asked her to do this, I thought she might hesitate. Pull back. She'd just gotten here and the situation with her." She paused delicately. "I know," I said. "She didn't hesitate for 2 seconds." Monica shook her head. "She just asked about the 4 names. I smiled at that. "Yeah, that's Claire." Monica looked at me for a moment, in that way that women of a certain insight look at you when they're seeing something you're not quite ready to say out loud. "Right," she said, and left. I went back to my work. 6 days after the complaint was filed, Nathan showed up at Claire's apartment. She called me at 7:43 in the evening. I had just gotten home. I heard it immediately, not panic, but something tight coiled. "He's here," she said, "at your door. Outside the building. I can see him from the window. He's just standing there." Her voice was controlled. "He knows which window is mine." Everything in me went very still. "Call the police," I said. "Right now, while he's still there. This is exactly what your lawyer said, any physical appearance we file." "I know." A breath. "I know. Ryan, can you come?" "I'm already moving," I said. I was in my car in under 2 minutes. The drive was 11 minutes at that hour. I made it in 8. I want to tell you what I was thinking on that drive because it matters. I was not thinking about Nathan Cole as someone to confront. I was not thinking about putting myself between them as a physical barrier. I was thinking about what Claire had said to me weeks earlier during one of those late-night conversations at the kitchen table when she was talking about what the previous 4 years had felt like from the inside. She had said the worst part wasn't the control itself. It was that it came disguised as protection. Every time he stepped in to handle something for me, it was always framed as "I'm taking care of you." And slowly I stopped believing I could take care of myself. I had heard that. I had actually heard it. So on that 11-minute drive that I made in 8, I was thinking whatever happens when I get there, I stay behind her. She opened the building door when I knocked. She was in the main hallway, phone in her hand, already on with the non-emergency police line. I could hear the dispatcher's voice. Claire was giving the address calm and clear. I stood behind her. She finished the call, looked at me. "He left," she said, "about 2 minutes after I called." "Okay. But I have the timestamp from my window, and you can confirm you received a call from me at 7:43. "I can confirm that." She nodded. She was holding herself very straight. There was something in her eyes that was neither fear nor fury, but a very precise combination of both, like a chemical reaction that produces something completely different from its original components. "I'm calling my lawyer," she said. "Tonight." "Yes. And I'm filing the restraining order paperwork tomorrow morning." "I'll drive you." She looked at me. "Ryan, you don't—" "I know I don't," I said. "I want to." A silence. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." The police came 20 minutes later, took her statement, documented the incident. One of the officers, a woman maybe 40, with the kind of calm that comes from having taken 1,000 of these reports, looked at Claire's documentation file with an expression I recognized as professional respect. "This is thorough," the officer said. "I've been keeping it since the first contact," Claire said. "Good. Bring all of this when you file. It matters." After the officers left, we sat in Claire's apartment. She made tea she didn't drink. I sat across from her and watched her think through something she wasn't saying yet. Finally, she said, "I keep waiting to feel afraid." "You're not—" "I am, but not the way I used to be." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "When I lived with him, I was afraid in this low, constant background way, like a sound you stop hearing because it's always there." She looked up. "Now I'm afraid like I can see the thing I'm afraid of. It has a shape. I can document it. I can file paperwork against it." She paused. "That's completely different." "Yes," I said. "It is." She held the mug. "I don't know if I'm brave," she said, "or if I'm just finally angry enough." "I'm not sure those are different things," I said. She almost smiled. Then she said quietly, "Do you want to know the strangest part?" "Yeah." "I feel more myself right now sitting here after Nathan just showed up outside my window than I did at almost any point during those 4 years when everything was supposedly fine." She said it like she was still slightly surprised by it. "I think I spent so long being managed that I forgot what it felt like to react to my own life." I sat with that. "How does it feel?" I asked. She thought about it seriously. "It feels like standing up after you've been sitting in a cramped position for so long you stopped noticing your legs were asleep," she said. "And the pins and needles hurt, but you're standing." In the morning, I drove her to the lawyer's office. She brought the legal pad, now almost completely full, 2 months of careful documentation, and the police report from the night before, and the voicemails and the screenshots and the statement from her mother about Nathan's contact with her. The lawyer read through all of it. Then she looked up at Claire and said, "We're filing today." Claire nodded. Once. Firm. The way she nodded when something was decided and required no further discussion. I waited in the outer office, an hour and 20 minutes. When Claire came out, she was carrying a copy of the filed paperwork, and she had the expression of someone who has just set down something very heavy and is noticing for the first time what their arms feel like without it. "Done," I said. "Done," she said. We walked out. The sun was doing something aggressive for Portland in early November. I squinted at it. "You okay?" I asked. She stopped walking, tipped her head back for a second, closed her eyes into the light. "Yeah," she said. "I really am." Then she opened her eyes, and we walked to the car. 2 weeks later, something happened at work that I had seen building for months, but that still hit differently when it arrived. HR completed their preliminary review and informed management that the complaint against Victor Hale had sufficient documentation to warrant a formal investigation. Victor was temporarily reassigned from direct supervisory duties pending the outcome. They announced it on a Tuesday morning. Victor wasn't at his desk by noon. I found Monica in the break room. She was standing by the window with her coffee, and when she saw me, she said nothing, just raised her cup slightly. I understood. I found Claire at her desk, head down, working. I stopped beside her. "You heard," I said quietly. "I heard," she said, without looking up. "How do you feel?" She thought about it, set her pen down. "Like it's not over yet," she said, "but like the first real thing happened that I didn't do alone." I wanted to say something to that. I couldn't find the right words, so I just nodded and went back to my desk. That night, she showed up at my door. Not drenched this time, not scared. She had a bottle of wine and she said, "I don't want to be in my apartment alone tonight, and this is the only place I actually want to be. Can I come in?" I stepped back, and I thought about the first time she'd said those 3 words. Standing in the rain with a duffel bag and eyes that kept cutting to the street. This time she stepped in like she owned the air in the room. We opened the wine and sat in the living room, and she talked and I listened, and somewhere around 11 she said something that made us both laugh so hard she had to put the glass down, and I thought this, right here, this is what's at the other end of what she's been walking through. I didn't say that out loud, but I thought it. And then very carefully I looked at the thing I'd been filing away for weeks. I looked at it directly. And I understood what it was. I wasn't going to do anything about it. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time, because she was still standing up, still feeling the pins and needles, still learning what her own legs felt like under her weight, after years of someone else deciding where she walked. And I had meant every word of what I'd said to her. I didn't want to be the man who saved her. I wanted to be the man she chose when she didn't need saving anymore. But that night, sitting in my living room at 11 p.m. with the wine and the laughter and the particular kind of ease that had built itself between us over 2 months of ordinary, extraordinary evenings, I understood for the first time that what I felt for her was not going to become smaller with time. It was going to do the opposite. And the question was not whether I felt it. The question was whether she was going to get all the way to the other side of this Nathan Victor, the legal process, the apartment, the project she'd had taken from her, and would eventually get back. And when she got there, when she was fully standing on her own ground in her own life, making her own decisions without asking anyone's permission. The question was what she would choose then. I didn't know the answer, but I was absolutely certain about one thing. It was going to be her choice. All of it. Every last word of it. Hers. She left around midnight, said goodnight at the door the way you do when you know you'll see someone tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Easy, natural, like breathing. I locked the door, stood in the quiet, and for the first time since that rainy Tuesday when all of this began, I thought about the future without immediately pulling back from it. I let myself think about it, just for a moment. Then I turned off the porch light and went to bed. And somewhere across the city in an apartment that was completely hers, with a bookshelf that was never going to hold what she'd put on it, Claire Dawson was probably writing in a brand new legal pad. The old one was full. She had filled it entirely with the truth. And the truth had held the restraining order was granted on a Thursday morning in late November. Claire called me at 10:14 a.m. I was in the middle of a shipment review that suddenly felt completely irrelevant. "It's done," she said. 2 words. But the weight behind them, the weight that was no longer there, I could hear it in the space around them. "How do you feel?" I asked. She laughed, short and real. "Like I want to cry and I'm not going to because I'm sitting in my car in a parking garage and I refuse to cry in a parking garage." That seems like a reasonable boundary. It does, doesn't it? A pause. "Ryan, he has to stay 500 feet away. From my apartment, my workplace, my car. 500 feet. Another pause. I looked it up. 500 feet is roughly 1.5 city blocks. He cannot be within 1.5 city blocks of my life without breaking the law. Yeah, I said. I know that doesn't fix everything. No. I know he could violate it. Yes. But it means if he does, he's handed you everything, I said. Documented, legal, actionable. She exhaled. I'm going back to work, she said. I just wanted you to know. I'm glad you called. She hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment, and I thought about a woman standing in the rain on my porch 2 months ago with a duffel bag and eyes that couldn't stop checking the street behind her. I thought about how far that was from a woman sitting in a parking garage refusing to cry because she'd chosen the time and place and terms of her own relief. I went back to the shipment review. I couldn't concentrate on it for the rest of the afternoon. That evening we had dinner together at her apartment for the first time. She actually cooked not the disastrous pasta situation from my kitchen, but something real and deliberate. Chicken with something that smelled like lemon and garlic rice that she'd made twice because the first batch she wasn't satisfied with. I sat at her kitchen table while she worked, and we talked about nothing significant and everything important the way we always did. And at some point she said without looking up from the stove, "Can I tell you something I haven't said out loud yet?" "Yeah," I said. "I think I spent so long being afraid of what would happen if I actually pushed back that I didn't realize." She stirred something. Stopped. "I didn't realize the pushing back itself would feel like this." "Like what?" She turned around, spatula in hand, looking at me with an expression I didn't have a clean word for. "Like myself," she said. I didn't say anything. "Like I forgot who that was," she continued, "and then I stopped forgetting." She turned back to the stove. We ate dinner, and it was good, and afterward we sat with our second glasses of wine, and she told me about calling her mother that afternoon. Her mother had cried. Her mother had said things that Claire had needed to hear for a long time and hadn't been able to ask for because she hadn't been able to admit how bad it had gotten. "She asked me why I didn't tell her sooner," Claire said. "What did you say?" I said because I didn't want her to see me as someone who couldn't manage her own life. She held her glass. She said, "Claire, I would have just seen you as someone who needed help. That's not the same thing." She looked at her wine. "I've been thinking about that all day." "It's a good thing to think about," I said. "The difference between needing help and not being able to manage." She nodded slowly. "Nathan used to, whenever I struggled with something, he'd frame it as evidence. Like, look, you need me. Look how much you need me." Her voice didn't waver, but I watched her grip tighten slightly on the glass. He made needing anything feel like weakness, so I stopped admitting I needed anything. Including help getting out. Including help getting out. She looked up. "Which is why when I showed up at your door, you almost didn't," I said. It wasn't a question. She looked at me for a moment. Then, "I sat in my car outside your house for 22 minutes. I had the engine running. I was ready to drive away at least 4 times. I hadn't known that." "What made you knock?" I asked. She thought about it carefully. "I thought about going back to my apartment," she said, "and I thought about Nathan standing outside it, and I thought—" She stopped. "I thought I would rather risk being wrong about Ryan Bennett than certain about Nathan Cole." That sentence did something to my chest that I was not going to examine right now. "I'm glad you knocked," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "So am I," she said. We looked at each other for a second longer than was entirely casual. Then she refilled my wine glass and said, "Tell me something about you that has nothing to do with any of this." And I understood that she needed to put it down for the evening, and I obliged, and we talked about completely other things until nearly midnight. I drove home. I did not examine my chest, but I noticed. December arrived, and with it a cold that Portland does specifically, not dramatic, just persistent gray settling into gray. Claire had been in her apartment for 6 weeks. The restraining order had been served. Nathan had gone silent in a way that felt for the first time less like strategic recalculation and more like the particular quiet of someone who has finally run out of moves that work. Her lawyer called it compliance, said it wasn't uncommon that the paperwork made it real in a way that even the filing hadn't. Claire called it Tuesday. "Because it's just Tuesday now," she said when she told me, "not waiting for what Nathan does next Tuesday, just Tuesday." That was the clearest description I'd heard of what peace of mind actually sounds like when it first arrives. At work, The investigation into Victor Hale was moving through its process with the grinding institutional thoroughness of something that has been put in motion and cannot be easily stopped. 2 more employees had come forward, their accounts mapped onto the pattern Claire and Monica had documented with depressing precision. Victor was still in the building, reassigned to a role with no direct reports. He passed Claire in the hallway twice that I witnessed. Both times he looked through her like she wasn't there. Both times she looked directly back at him and kept walking. I watched that the second time and thought he has no idea what he is looking at. He thought he was looking at a junior employee who had made trouble for him. He was looking at the person who had ended his 11-year run. Monica stopped by my desk on a Wednesday afternoon and said, "They're going to offer him a separation package." When? End of the month, most likely. She said it without particular satisfaction, just the tone of someone recording a fact. "It won't feel like enough." "No," I said, "but it means he loses the thing he used it for, the authority, the access." She paused. "For Claire, for the others, it means they outlasted him. In this building, in this department." She looked at me. "That matters." "Yeah," I said. "It does." She started to leave, then turned back. "Ryan." "Yeah." "She's going to be offered the project lead position, the logistics optimization work. Management discussed it this morning, formally." Monica watched my face. "They're going to ask her to take it back and expand it." I sat with that for a second. "Does she know?" "Not yet. You'll probably see her before I do." She tilted her head slightly. "Try not to look like you know something." "I'll do my best." I did my best. It lasted approximately 4 hours, which was how long it took before Claire appeared in my office doorway at 4:50 p.m., looking slightly stunned. "They offered me the project," she said. "Yeah," I said, perfectly neutral, proud of myself. "The logistics optimization, full lead. They want to expand the scope, add 2 analysts underneath me, present the final model to the regional directors in March." She leaned against the doorframe. "Ryan, 3 months ago, I was documenting the date and time Victor changed an approval he'd already given in writing. And now," she looked at me, "and now they want me to present to the regional directors. Are you going to take it?" The question sat there. I watched her think about it. Not the fearful hesitation I'd seen in the early weeks, the reflexive second-guessing, the need to weigh every decision against what someone else might think. This was something different. This was a person who knew what she wanted, checking once to make sure she wasn't missing anything. "Yes," she said, "obviously yes." And something in her face when she said it, that brightness, that forward-leaning certainty, that was what I had known was in there since the morning after her first day when she'd come downstairs and made coffee for 2 people without being asked. "Congratulations," I said. It's not..." She waved a hand. "I haven't done anything yet." "Claire, you've been doing it for 3 months. The project just caught up." She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "I'm buying dinner tonight. You don't get a vote." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said. Dinner was at a Thai place she'd discovered 2 weeks earlier and had been wanting to bring me to. We sat across from each other at a small table, and she talked through the project, the scope, the timeline, what she wanted the final model to look like. And I listened and asked questions and watched her become the person she was when nobody was managing her down to a smaller size. And somewhere between the spring rolls and the main course, I thought, there it is. That's what she was the whole time. That's what he almost took. Almost. I drove her home. She lived 11 minutes from the restaurant. We sat in the car outside her building for 20 minutes, talking about nothing the way you do when neither person is quite ready for the conversation to end. She finally said, "Okay, I have to go in or I'll be useless tomorrow." "Yeah, Ryan." She had her hand on the door handle. "Thank you, for tonight, for..." She stopped. "For all of it, the whole 3 months." "You don't have to thank me for all of it," I said. "Some of it was genuinely selfish. I like having someone to argue with about load-bearing walls." She laughed. "I'm right about that, by the way." "You are completely wrong about that." "The shelf is holding." "For now," I said, "structurally speaking." "Good night, Ryan." "Good night, Claire." She got out of the car, walked to the building door, keyed in, pushed it open. Then she turned and looked back at me through the glass for just a second. I raised a hand. She smiled. The door closed. I drove home. My house was quiet in the way it had been quiet since she moved out, which was a different quiet than before she moved in. Before Claire, quiet was just the absence of sound. Now it had a particular texture. It had shape. I noticed it. I did not fix it. That was not mine to fix. January arrived. Nathan violated the restraining order on a Thursday night at 6:52 p.m. He didn't go to her apartment. He didn't go to her workplace. He sent an email from a new address to her personal account, an account he shouldn't have had access to, but did through an old contact of hers, who Claire would later discover had been feeding him small pieces of information for months without understanding what he was doing with them. The email was 3 sentences long. It said he thought about her every day. He knew she had a court order against him. He just needed her to know that he wasn't the person she was making him out to be. She forwarded it to her lawyer at 7:04 p.m. She forwarded it to me at 7:05. She called at 7:06. "I got it," I said when I picked up. "He just handed me a violation," she said. Her voice was steady, absolutely, completely steady. "He did. First documented contact since the order was served." "Yes." "My lawyer says we file a violation report tomorrow morning and it goes on record." "Yes." "And the friend, the one who gave him my email?" She paused. "I'm not angry at her. She didn't understand what she was doing, but she's not in my life anymore. That's what that is." Something about how she said that matter-of-fact, clear no hesitation told me she had already processed the grief of it and moved through to the decision. All in the 12 minutes since the email arrived. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm better than okay," she said. "Ryan, he just made a mistake in writing, with a timestamp." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. She started laughing too. The real kind. The kind that had nothing to do with nerves. "Only he would hand me that," she said. "Only Nathan Cole would send a written violation of a court order and frame it as proof that he's not a bad person. The man doesn't know what documentation means." "He does not," she said. "He genuinely does not." The violation went on record the next morning. Her lawyer used it to strengthen the case for full civil proceedings and flag the contact with the mutual friend as a potential pattern of third-party harassment. And Nathan Cole, for the first time since that rainy night outside her old apartment, ran out of angles. He went quiet, really quiet, the kind of quiet that has nothing strategic in it. February. The investigation at Northwest Freight concluded. Victor Hale accepted a separation package and resigned. The announcement was made in a department email carefully worded, no specific details, the language of institutional self-protection. But everyone knew. Monica read the email at her desk and then came to find Claire. I heard about it from Claire later that evening. Monica had knocked on her office door closed. It sat down and said simply, "We did it." Claire told me she hadn't cried in Victor's office or in the parking garage after filing. She hadn't cried when the restraining order was granted or when the violation went on record. She cried when Monica sat down across from her and said those 3 words. "Because it wasn't just me," she told me. "That's what got me. I've been so used to handling things alone, getting out of Nathan's building, the documentation, filing everything, and then Monica sitting there saying we, like the weight was always distributed and I'd just been too used to carrying things alone to notice." "How long did you cry?" "Approximately 45 seconds, and then I straightened up and said we should get lunch." "Obviously." Monica said she was buying. "Good." I let her. I smiled at the phone. We had been talking on the phone more in February than in person, which was partly logistics, and partly the project consuming her days, and partly I suspected something she was circling, something she was working toward that I was giving her time to get to. I was patient. I had always been patient with her. Not because I was performing patience, but because she had earned every inch of ground she was standing on, and the last thing she needed was someone rushing her off it. It was a Saturday afternoon in late February when she texted, "Can I come over?" Something moved in my chest. Not urgency, just recognition. I texted back, "Doors open." She arrived 20 minutes later. Not drenched, not scared, not carrying everything she needed to survive, just herself in her jacket with her hair still slightly damp from the snow that had started that morning and turned Portland temporarily and improbably white. She came in. I gave her tea. We sat in the living room, same couch, same lamp, on different version of everything else. She held the mug with both hands the way she always did, said nothing for a minute. Then, "I need to tell you something." "Okay," I said. "And I need you to not say anything until I'm done." "Okay." She looked at the mug, then up at me. When I knocked on your door in October, I was the most frightened I had ever been in my life. Not because of Nathan specifically, but because I realized I had spent 4 years becoming someone I didn't recognize, and I had no idea if the person I used to be was still in there. She paused. And you opened the door, and you didn't ask me to explain myself, and you didn't make it a debt or a drama or a reason for me to owe you anything. Another pause. And over the next 4 months, I found out that the person I used to be was still in there. She'd just been very, very quiet. She looked at me steadily. I found my job, she said. I found my apartment. I found my legal standing. I found my way through Victor and through Nathan and through all of it. She set the mug down. And I know I did those things. I know they're mine. I'm not confused about that. I know you're not, I said. But I also know, she continued, that I found my way back to myself in a house where someone left the light on. She held my gaze. And I've been trying to figure out for the last 2 months how to say that without it sounding like gratitude. Because it's not gratitude. Gratitude is what you feel for someone who did you a favor. She leaned forward slightly. This is something else, she said. The room was very quiet. I had promised not to say anything until she was done. I'm done, she said. I looked at her for a moment. This woman who had documented everything, who had filed everything, who had stood at a door with a security chain and looked directly at the man who had tried to take her apart and said the first true thing he'd said all night was good news, who had made coffee for 2 people she'd known for 14 hours without being asked, who argued about load-bearing walls with complete confidence, who cried for 45 seconds and then said, "Let's get lunch." Claire, I said. Yeah. I fell in love with you somewhere around the 3rd week of October. I think it was the load-bearing wall argument. I'm not completely sure. She stared at me. Then she laughed, the big real kind, the kind that made her press her hand to her mouth. The load-bearing wall argument, she repeated. You were so completely certain and so completely wrong. I was right. The shelf is going to fall. The shelf has not fallen. It's February. It's still standing, Ryan. For now, I said. And then quieter, Claire. She stopped laughing. She looked at me. And for a moment neither of us said anything, and the room held it all, 4 months of it. The rainy Tuesday, and the coffee for 2, and the legal pads, and the restraining order, and the project lead, and the Thai restaurant, and the 20 minutes in the car outside her building. All of it held in one quiet February room. I'm not ready to say it back yet, she said. Her voice was soft and completely honest. I want to, I can feel it. But I need you to know that when I say it, it's going to be because I'm sure, not because I feel like I should, not because of anything except that I'm sure. I know, I said. You're not... She searched my face. You're not hurt. No, I said. And I meant it. Claire, the whole point is that it's yours. The timeline, the decision, all of it. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached across the cushion between us and took my hand. Not romantically. Not dramatically. The way you take someone's hand when you want them to understand something that words are slightly too small for. I held it. We sat like that for a while talking about other things. The project, her mother's upcoming visit, whether the snow was going to stick, the load-bearing wall briefly one more time. When she left an hour later, she squeezed my hand at the door and said, I'll call you tomorrow. I know, I said. She smiled and left. I stood in the doorway and watched her walk to her car. She turned once and waved without looking back the way you do when you know someone is still there. I raised a hand. Then I closed the door. I did not turn off the porch light. That was the moment, not the hand, not the conversation, not the things she'd said about finding herself in a house where someone left the light on. That was the moment I understood something I don't think I'll ever find a better way to say. Love the real kind. The kind worth anything. It doesn't announce itself dramatically. It doesn't arrive in a moment you can photograph. It builds in the ordinary spaces. In the coffee made for 2 before anyone asks. In the argument about the shelf that's still standing. In the 20 minutes in the car that neither person wants to end. It builds in the space between the person someone was before they got hurt and the person they become when they finally believe they're allowed to be themselves again. I had been in that space with Claire Dawson for 4 months, and standing at my door with the porch light on, watching her taillights disappear around the corner, I thought, however long it takes, however much time she needs, I'll be right here, the light will be on. She called the next day, just like she said she would. Ryan picked up on the second ring the way he always did, and Claire said, "My mother wants to meet you." He was quiet for exactly 1 second. "Okay," he said. "That's it, just okay." "What else would I say?" She laughed, short and real. "Most people say something like, 'Oh, that's a big step,' or 'Are you sure?' or 'Claire, I would be honored to meet your mother,' when—" Another laugh softer. "She's coming the 3rd weekend of March. I told her about you. Not everything, but enough." "What's enough?" She thought about it. "I told her you were the kind of person who opens a door without making it complicated." Ryan said nothing for a moment. Then, "I think that's the best thing anyone has ever said about me. Don't let it go to your head." "Too late," he said. "It's already there." She was still smiling when she hung up. March came in cold and then suddenly almost aggressively warm the way Pacific Northwest springs sometimes do, like the season has been saving itself. Claire's mother, Patricia Dawson, arrived on a Friday evening. She was 61, small and precise in her movements, with Claire's same way of looking directly at a person when they spoke, like she was listening with her whole face. Ryan met them for dinner at a restaurant Claire had chosen carefully. Not too formal, not too casual, somewhere with good food and enough ambient noise that silences wouldn't feel loaded. Patricia shook Ryan's hand when they met, held it a beat longer than necessary and said, "Claire told me you let her use your guest room." "I did," Ryan said. "She said you never once made her feel like she owed you for it." "She didn't owe me anything." Patricia studied him. "The way you study something you're deciding whether to trust." Then she said, "She hasn't said that about very many people in her life. I want you to know I noticed." Claire, sitting across from them, was very interested in her water glass. Ryan said, "She earned everything she has right now. I just happen to have a spare room." Patricia looked at her daughter. Claire looked up from her water glass. Something passed between them. Quick, private, the entire compressed language of a mother and daughter who have been through something and have just quietly arrived at the other side of it. "All right," Patricia said, and picked up her menu. "What's good here?" Dinner lasted 2.5 hours. Patricia asked Ryan about his work, his family, Portland, 7 years at the same company. He answered everything without performing. He was the same person at that table that he was in his kitchen at 11 p.m. arguing about load-bearing walls, and he knew it, and Patricia knew it too. Walking out afterward, Claire fell into step beside him, while her mother moved slightly ahead to look at something in a shop window. "She likes you," Claire said quietly. "How can you tell?" "She asked you 7 questions and actually listened to every answer. She usually starts checking her phone by question 3. He smiled. "Good benchmark." "Very." She glanced at him sideways. "Ryan." "Yeah. Thank you. For tonight." "You don't have to." "I know I don't." She looked straight ahead. "I wanted to." I didn't say anything. But he felt it, the specific weight of a thank you, that isn't debt, that isn't obligation, that is just one person acknowledging another person in the simple, clean way that only happens when nobody is keeping score. It felt like something completing itself. Patricia left Sunday afternoon, hugged Claire for a long time at the door. Then she turned to Ryan, who had driven them both to brunch that morning, and she hugged him too, briefly, firmly, without preamble. She said into his shoulder, "Take care of each other, not just her, both of them." Ryan drove home with that sentence sitting somewhere behind his sternum, warm and slightly destabilizing, and thought, yes, that is exactly it. That is the whole thing right there. The project presentation happened on the 14th of March. Claire stood in front of the regional directors, 7 of them, plus the divisional VP, plus a room full of senior managers, and presented the logistics optimization model she had been building for 6 months, the model that Victor had tried to take from her. The work that had survived his reassignment, the investigation, the separation package, all of it, and had come out the other side, not just intact, but expanded. Ryan was not in that room. He was at his desk doing his own work, completely unable to concentrate. Monica appeared in his doorway at 11:47. "Standing ovation," she said. He looked up. "Not literal," Monica said, "but close." She leaned against the doorframe. The VP asked her how long she'd been with the company. She said 6 months. He looked at the model. He looked at her. He said, "That needs to change." Monica paused for effect, meaning her title. Ryan set his pen down. "They're promoting her," he said. "They're creating a position. Operations Development Lead. It's new. They're creating it specifically." Monica looked at him with that expression she used when she was seeing something she chose not to comment on. She's going to want to tell you herself, so look surprised. I will do my best, he said. You said that last time. I lasted 4 hours last time. She's coming out of the meeting in 10 minutes. Time yourself. Monica left. Ryan managed 7 minutes before Claire appeared in his doorway with the specific expression of someone who is trying to hold something enormous inside the normal dimensions of their face. Hi, she said. Hi, he said. How'd it go? She looked at the ceiling, then at him. Then she closed the door behind her, sat in the chair across from his desk and said, They're making me an operations development lead. Yeah, he said. She pointed at him. Don't do that. Don't yeah, like you didn't already know. Monica came by. Of course she did. She dropped her hand, but she was smiling the full kind, the one that took over her whole face when she forgot to contain it. Ryan, they created the position, for me. They said the model I built should be implemented company-wide, and they want me to lead the implementation and develop the methodology for the other regional offices. It's a lot, she said. It's a really big lot. Are you going to take it? She looked at him steadily. Is that a real question? She said. No, he said. Not even slightly. She laughed. And then she did something he hadn't expected. She leaned back in the chair and pressed both hands to her face for just a second, not crying, not laughing, just holding herself steady against the size of it. He waited. She lowered her hands. Her eyes were bright. 6 months ago, she said, I was sitting in my car outside your house with the engine running, trying to decide if I trusted you enough to knock. I know, he said, and now I'm sitting here and I have a restraining order and my own apartment and a job they built around me. She looked at her hands. I keep waiting for the part where I wake up. You're not going to wake up, he said. This is just what happens when you stop letting someone else write the story. She looked up at him. You're very good at saying the right thing, she said. Has anyone told you that once or twice, he said. It's annoying. I know, she smiled, stood up, straightened her jacket with the precise collected movement she used when she was pulling herself back to the day's business. Dinner tonight, she said. I'm buying, again. You always buy when it's good news. Correct, and you buy when it's a crisis. It evens out. That is a deeply unequal distribution, he said. Life is unequal, she said pleasantly, and opened his door and walked out. He sat at his desk for another 30 seconds, doing nothing, just holding the particular quality of that moment. Then he went back to work. April arrived and something shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way things shifted in the hard months, Nathan's texts, Victor's maneuvering the restraining order, the violation. This was slower, quieter, the shift of a season changing rather than a crisis resolving. Claire called him one Tuesday evening at 9:15. He could hear immediately that something was different. Not wrong, different. Can I ask you something? She said. Yeah. When you said it in February on the couch, were you scared? He thought about it honestly. Terrified, he said. Really? Yes, you just said you needed to tell me something. I had absolutely no idea which direction it was going. You seemed calm. I was not calm. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I've been thinking about what I said, about not being ready to say it yet, about needing to be sure. He kept his voice steady. Yeah. I want you to know that I meant it, the way I said it. I needed it to be mine, not a reaction, not gratitude, not filling a space. I know, he said. I understood that. I know you did. That's the thing. A pause. Ryan, you have never once pushed me toward anything. Not toward the complaint, not toward the lawyer, not toward any of it. You kept the light on and let me find my own way. He said nothing. I think, she said slowly, that I've been waiting to feel sure, and I kept thinking sure would feel like certainty, like I would wake up one morning and it would be obvious. Another pause. But it's not like that. It's more like I've been sure for a while and I just didn't trust myself to name it because I spent 4 years being told my instincts were wrong. His chest was doing something complicated. Claire, he said. I love you, she said. Simple, direct, hers. Not a response to anything. Not performed. Not careful. Just the true thing said in her own time on her own terms, after she had rebuilt herself from the inside out and arrived finally at solid enough ground to say what was on it. He exhaled. I know, he said. She laughed, loud and sudden and completely delighted. Did you just Han Solo me? She said. Maybe. Ryan. I love you too, he said. I have for a very long time. I was waiting for you to catch up. I did not need to catch up. I needed to trust myself. You're right. That's what I meant. Is it? No, but it should have been. She was still laughing. You are such a... I love you, he said again, quieter. The laughter softened. Yeah, she said. Me too. They talked for another hour about nothing that mattered and everything that did, and when they finally hung up, Ryan sat in the quiet of his house and thought, this is what it feels like when something that was always true finally gets said out loud. Not like a beginning, like a door opening into a room that was already yours. The civil proceedings against Nathan concluded in May. It wasn't a criminal trial. The restraining order violation combined with the documented pattern of stalking behavior resulted in a civil settlement that included mandatory counseling, an extended no-contact order and legal fees that, according to Claire's lawyer, would take him a considerable time to work through. Claire told Ryan about it on a Wednesday evening. She was sitting on his couch. She had started doing that again, coming over on evenings when neither of them had anything specific planned, just because it was where she wanted to be, and she held her tea and said it the same way she'd said everything since February. Simply, directly, like facts that belonged to her. It's done, she said. How do you feel? She thought about it. Like I don't have to keep looking over my shoulder anymore, she said. Like I can just... She stopped. Like I can just walk through my own city and it's mine. It was always yours, he said. I know, but now it feels like it. She leaned back against the couch, stared at the ceiling. He said something in his statement, she said, through his lawyer, that he never meant to hurt me, that he cared about me in his own way. She looked at the ceiling. I believe him. Ryan looked at her. You believe him? I think he genuinely believes he cared about me. I think he genuinely believes the way he cared was love. She lowered her eyes back to her tea. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. He wasn't performing care to manipulate me. He actually thought that was what care looked like. She paused. Which is almost sadder. And it's also why it worked for so long. Ryan said nothing. She continued, because when someone acts like they love you, you look for evidence they're lying. But if they're not lying, if they actually believe it, there's no lie to find. You just keep thinking you're the problem. You were never the problem. I know that now. She looked at him. I needed someone to show me what it looked like when it was real, when it didn't come with conditions. He held her gaze. I'm not sure I did anything special, he said honestly. You opened a door, she said, and you never once made me feel like I owed you for it. You didn't. I know, she smiled. That's what made it real. Summer moved in slowly, and then all at once, the way Portland summers do, and Claire Dawson's life began to look like something she had built, rather than something that had happened to her. She was 5 months into her role as Operations Development Lead. She had 2 analysts working under her, both younger, both navigating the specific uncertainty of early careers, and Ryan watched her with them the way Monica had watched her with the complaint. Steady, clear, precise about expectations and flexible about method, and never not once changing the rules after the game started. She noticed nervous employees the way she'd noticed nervous new hires since her second week at the company, like she had recalibrated some internal instrument, and could detect the specific frequency of someone trying to take up less space than they were entitled to. One afternoon, Ryan passed her office and heard her say to one of her analysts, firmly, clearly, with no room for ambiguity, Your instinct on this was correct. Don't apologize for being right. He kept walking. I was smiling for the next 20 minutes. Monica retired in June. Not dramatically, she was not a dramatic retirement person. She gave her 4 weeks' notice, trained her replacement thoroughly, and on her last day came by Claire's office and Ryan's office in that order, and said in each case very little. To Ryan she said, watch over the department. To Claire, she said something private that Claire shared with him that evening, sitting on his couch with the summer light still coming through the window at 8 p.m. She said, Monica told me that when she first asked me to join the complaint, she wasn't sure I would last. She thought I'd back down. She said, Claire looked at her hands. She said I reminded her of herself at 29, before she learned to be quiet. What did you say to that? Ryan asked. I said I was glad she didn't stay quiet, that her being loud even years later was part of what made it possible for me to be loud at all. He looked at her. "That was exactly right," he said. "I know," she said simply. And he thought, there it is. That's the distance between October and June, between a woman who said "I know" and immediately walked it back, and a woman who says "I know" and means it without apology. August came. 1 year since Claire had taken the job at Northwest Freight. 1 year since a rainy Tuesday morning when she'd walked into a briefing and caught an error that predated her arrival and proved it quietly, and then stood in the break room with shaking hands that no one was supposed to see. Ryan did not make a thing of the anniversary. That was not his style, and it was not hers. But on a Tuesday evening in the middle of August, he came home to find Claire already at his kitchen table with takeout containers and her laptop open to something she was working on, utterly at home in his space in the way she had been for months now, and she looked up and said, "Do you know what day it is?" "Tuesday," he said. "Specifically," she said. He looked at her. She was watching him with something quiet and retrospective in her expression, not sad, not sentimental, exactly more like a person checking a compass, seeing how far they've come. 1 year, he said. 1 year, she agreed. He sat down across from her. "How does it feel?" he asked. She thought about it with the seriousness she brought to everything worth thinking about. "Like a different life," she said. "But the right one. Like I took a wrong road for 4 years and then got back on the right one, and now I'm somewhere I actually want to be." "That's a good way to feel," he said. "Yeah." She looked at him. "Ryan, yeah. I want to tell you something. Something I've been thinking about for a while." He waited. "That night," she said, "when I knocked on your door, I had the engine running in my car for 22 minutes. I told you that before. What I didn't tell you—" She stopped, started again. "What I didn't tell you is that the reason I finally knocked wasn't that I trusted you. It was that I couldn't think of a single person in my life who I had any evidence to distrust." He looked at her steadily. "You hadn't done anything wrong," she said. "That's not nothing. 4 years of someone systematically reframing everything, and all you had done was tell me about a printer and walk me toward a parking garage." Her voice was quiet and even. "I knocked because you had no record against you. That's all. It was the smallest possible bar, and you cleared it, and you had no idea." He considered that. "I'm glad I cleared it," he said. "So am I." She held his eyes. "And now a year later you've had every opportunity to be something other than what you were that night. Every chance to make it complicated, every reason to remind me what I owe you." She shook her head. "And you never have. You don't owe me anything." "I know," she said. "That's the point." I understood what she was doing. She was completing something, saying 1 year out the thing that closes the circle. Not because she needed to, she didn't operate from need anymore, but because she wanted to. Because it was true, and it was hers, and she was choosing to say it. "Thank you," she said, "for the door, for the guest room, for the coffee machine, for letting me be exactly where I was without pushing me toward where you wanted me to be." She looked at him. "For leaving the light on." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you for knocking." She smiled. And then she reached across the takeout containers and took his hand, and they sat like that for a while, eating cold food and talking about nothing significant and everything real. And the summer evening came through the kitchen window, warm and unhurried, and the house was full of exactly the right kind of quiet. October. 14 months after the rainy Tuesday. Ryan came home from work on a Thursday evening to find Claire's car in the driveway. She had a key by then, had had one for months, given without ceremony offered, and accepted the same way they did most things without making it larger than it was. He found her in the kitchen. She was making pasta. Actually making it. Properly. The water was boiling, the sauce was going, the timing was correct. She had learned somewhere between the disaster of his early house guest weeks and now, and she had learned on her own without making a production of it, because that was how she did things. She heard him come in and said without turning around, 15 minutes. "I'll wash up," he said. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, his table, the table where she had first opened her legal pad and started building the case that changed everything, and she told him about a meeting she'd had that afternoon with the VP about expanding the optimization model to the Pacific Division. And he told her about a conversation he'd had with his manager about moving to a senior planning role. And they talked about what both of those things meant, practically, financially, logistically, the way two people talk about the future when they have stopped treating the future as a separate country that neither of them lives in yet. After dinner, she poured the last of a bottle of wine into 2 glasses and said, "Can I tell you something?" "You always ask that before you say something important," he said. "I do, every time." She considered that. "Huh. Then, can I tell you something?" He laughed. "Yes," he said. She held her glass. "I want to move in here," she said. "With you, officially. I want to give up my apartment and come home to this house." She looked at him levelly. "Not because I need to, not because it's practical, not because it's the next step, or because someone expects it." She paused. "Because it's where I want to be. This table, this kitchen, these terrible plants that somehow keep surviving. The plants are thriving. They look vaguely stressed. They are thriving." "Ryan." "Yes," he said. She stopped. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Obviously, yes. Claire, I've been waiting for you to say that for 4 months." "4 months? Why didn't you?" "Because it's your choice. It was always your choice." She stared at him. Then she set her wine glass down and she said, "Ryan Bennett, you are genuinely the most—" She stopped. Couldn't find the word. Tried again. "How are you real?" "I'm told I have good instincts about printers," he said. She laughed. The full kind, the kind that had taken him months to see and that he now considered one of the better things in his life. She moved in 3 weeks later. Not dramatically, not with a ceremony. She brought her things in stages the way she did everything deliberately on her own timeline, making decisions with the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt her judgment from the inside out and trusted it now. The bookshelf came last. Ryan looked at it when they'd finished and said, "It's going to fall." "It's been standing for 14 months, she said, "on a different wall with different weight distribution." She looked at the shelf, then at him. "Bet," she said. He looked at her. This woman who had knocked on his door in the rain with everything she could carry, who had documented her own survival with the precision of someone who refused to be rewritten, who had stood at a chained door and told a man who had spent 4 years trying to erase her that the best news of the night was that they were finished. "No bet," he said. "I'll lose." She grinned and went to unpack another box. On a December evening, a year and 2 months after that, Tuesday night, Ryan Bennett stood in the kitchen of a house that no longer felt like his alone and thought about a question he'd been sitting with for a while. He thought about timing. He thought about the table where they'd had so many conversations where she'd filled 2 legal pads with dates and facts and the unalterable record of what had actually happened. I thought about the fact that she had moved into this house not because she needed it, but because she wanted it, and he thought that was the only foundation worth building anything on. He went to the drawer in the bedroom where he'd had the ring for 6 weeks. He came back to the kitchen. She was at the table with her laptop working on something for the Pacific Division expansion, her tea cooling at her elbow, utterly absorbed. She looked up, looked at his face, then at his hand. She closed the laptop. She didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at him with an expression he had no name for, not surprise exactly, not the theatrical shock of someone caught off guard, but something more like recognition, like a person seeing the thing they already knew was coming and choosing to feel the full weight of it anyway. "I'm not going to make a speech," he said. "You know I'm not good at speeches." "You're excellent at speeches," she said quietly. "Claire." "Yeah." "You chose yourself first," he said. "Every single step. You chose your apartment and your lawyer and your complaint and your promotion. And moving back here, you chose all of it because you wanted it, not because someone told you to, not because you owed anyone." He paused. "I want to be something you choose the same way, not because it's the next step, not because you feel like you should, because you want to." She was looking at him with those steady, direct eyes that had never once looked away from anything true. "So," he said, "do you want to—" She stood up, walked the 3 steps to where he was standing, took his face in both hands the way she did when she wanted him to understand she meant exactly what she was about to say. "Yes," she said, "because I want to, not because of anything else in the world except that." He put the ring on her finger. She looked at it for a moment, then up at him. "It fits," she said. "Yeah," he said. "I had some help." "Monica," she said immediately. "Monica," he confirmed. She laughed. And then she stopped laughing and just looked at him quietly, completely, the way she looked at things she had decided to keep. "Ryan," she said. "Yeah. I think I started falling in love with you on my first day, when you told me the printer needed a 3-second hold on the left button." He stared at her. "That is a very unglamorous origin point," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm a practical person." He put his arms around her, and she leaned into him, and they stood in the kitchen of a house that was both of theirs now, and neither of them said anything for a while. When people asked them later, "How did you two get together? How did it start?" Ryan would say they met at work, which was true, and Claire would say it started on a rainy Tuesday, which was also true. But the real beginning was what happened after the rain. It was a woman who had been slowly made smaller, deciding she was done being small. It was a man who understood that the most useful thing he could do was leave a door open and stay out of the way while she walked through it. It was two people who built something real because neither of them ever mistook gratitude for love, or rescue for respect, or the end of something hard for the beginning of something easy. It was a porch light left on, and a woman who finally knew she didn't need anyone's permission to come home. That was the whole story, and every word